Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you are watching the Week in Review. I'm your host Ade Darami, and as usual across the table from me I have Momodun Boj going through the stories, but at this point I have to apologize because our regular signing person Lamindi Sonko is not with us this week, but he will be back next week inshallah. So those of you who are regulars are probably saying, what's on the menu this week? Well, big story, of course, update on recent armed robberies that took place in various parts of the country. Also, the second edition of the National Dialogue is about to kick off, and President Barrow this week launched the legal year, where the legal establishment got together and they decided they looked back to last year and the year before, and they looked forward to this year and beyond. Also, finally, the Gambia is to get a dedicated commercial court. So, what else? Well, Louis Lucien Tomasi, the man who designed the Gambian flag. Remember him? No? Okay, when you watch the rest of this program, you will remember him and you'll know more about him. So those are some of the stuff that we have on this week's program. So, as I usually say, let's get things off and running. And our first story, it's the only place to start really. There've been a spate of robberies across the country, and the Gambia Police Force decided to have a press conference to update the media and the public about what they're doing about it. And the IGP, Inspector General of Police, had some interesting words to say, such as, listen to this and you'll find out.
If we know we are unable to protect the life and properties of this nation, let me be on record, I, Sidi Mukhtar Toure, will be the first person to tender my resignation to the executive to say I have failed in my duties and I am relieving myself of my responsibility.
According Mr. Mboj, a bold statement, some might say, many might say, and in fact many are saying, both in the newspapers and on online media, if we fail, I'll tender my resignation, to paraphrase him. I guess, by whose measure will that failure be assessed? What are your thoughts to hear somebody make what seemed quite a bold statement?
Absolutely, and refreshing.
Yeah,
as well, because you don't normally hear public officials, say stuff like that, so bold statements.
We're talking about accountability. Yeah,
absolutely, and then when you look at the language, properly. If I feel, I'm like, oh, I'm sure about it's about feelings here.
Yeah,
what about if statistics show that I'm not really doing a good job?
Well, this is the point I was going to come to.
At protecting people.
But this is the point I was going to come to, because once you've said that, if the figures start going up and then the public outcry starts to swell up and people start reminding him of this promise, that will obviously put pressure on him because he's made it. And as you said, it's refreshing to hear a public official make such a statement, but it's one that's quite a sort of hang heavy over his head, I'm sure.
But that's it, and it could go either way. To me, it could weigh you down, or you could see it as a challenge that you've really, where you sort of raised the bar for yourself. Yeah, nobody did it for you. True. You've raised the bar, and sort of show us that you're up to the job.
Well, this is it, and also they use that press conference to appeal to the public and say, look, we need your help in this fight if we're going to combat this and make sure it doesn't escalate. And to be fair, I mean, as I mentioned, CCTV played quite a part, because I'm told that once they published the very first of the CCTV images, within minutes, people had identified one individual, and he's brandishing a gun, and he's quite, if you and I even didn't know him, if we saw him, we might even recognize him. Such was the clarity of the image, and so of course that certainly helped. So they're saying that all the tools are there. It's not just for the police. You, the public, also have a duty to help us, because when we combat crime, we all benefit.
That's it, and businesses as well.
Yep.
So there are two things. They've apprehended people, suspects, which is very important. And does it also tell us that perhaps with businesses, install CCTVs?
I was going to say,
isn't it?
That's the
very, like that.
You read my mind, because other businesses now will say, this happened, and because that particular business had CCTV, they were able to identify the people. So I expect the sales of CCTVs to go through the roof, Mr. Mboj. But also, what does this tell us about the kind of new era that we're in? A, with people brandishing guns, something unusual here in the Gambia, and B, with the kind of surveillance that, again, we're not used to. You and I, you know, with England and America, everywhere you turn. I lived in England for so many years. In fact, allegedly in Europe, there are more CCTV per head of population in England than in any other country in Europe. But here, we're not used to that. And now, as I said, it's led to people being apprehended.
Absolutely, yes. When we were younger, I mean, we had sort of heard of armed robberies. Very rarely. It was infrequent.
No,
you know, when you hear one, it will take ages before
you hear another.
But then it was just, these bandits with knives.
Brandishing, you know, I was going to say brandishing machetes and the like.
That sort of thing. So now, well, it's a new age now, isn't it? We talk about the youth explosion. There are so many young people and the like. And now you have this exposure, social media. You see all sorts of things online. And then perhaps you want to go and try them out.
You think, I saw that in a Hollywood movie. I wonder if I can try that. And because, you know, people come with masks, with guns, park across the road, run across the street, terrorize everybody, and hopefully get away quick with because it's typically the kind of thing you'd see in a movie.
That's it. So it's just a matter of the authorities sort of understanding risks now we face, and then adapting to how are you going to tackle it. You know, adapt a system that would sort of tackle it effectively, because this sort of thing is here to stay. There's no point, as we normally do, appealing to moral sentiment and that sort of thing. It doesn't work like that. So these enforcement agencies, they really have to work effectively for us really to curb it, to control it, you know, and right now we've heard of what, 2, 3,
kind of,
you know what you mean, yes, because here you don't want.
And then there was the petrol station one again, where they came armed, and unfortunately for the robbers, there were armed guards there who just kind of returned fire in Farafenni, GNPC.
Exactly. So you look at whether, is this a new trend emerging? Are they targeting specific areas or entities?
Or types
it
of
seems like commercial businesses, they're targeting them a lot. What methods are they using? So how do we, you know, analyze all the information and come up with a counter? Isn't a countermeasure?
Well, you've kind of touched on a point I was going to raise, because when you talk about, you know, targeting businesses, you know, when we discussed this, you know, people were saying, well, at least they're not targeting homes. But of course, if businesses start having CCTV, maybe perhaps homes need to start having CCTV as well.
But some time back, remember, it's in the Bruford Heights area, we reported on stories where you've had these bandits attacking homes.
Yeah, quite. Yes,
with machetes granted, but you know, it's just a short step between that and guns and stuff like that. So yes, these people, wherever they perceive an opportunity, they'll go for it. Be it businesses or homes, if they feel that, oh, this person is rich, might be keeping whatever at home. So, you know, we just have to prepare for everything, be it the homes or businesses and the like. And yes, and they talk about people sort of being observant, vigilant, and reporting, you know, any suspicions, as it were. But what about their responsiveness? How swiftly would they respond? I mean, readily, if I were to go out now and ask anybody in a random survey, do you know the emergency number to call? When, for instance, you know, you've seen a crime being committed. This is stuff like that. We should all know it. It should be out there all the time. And then their responsiveness. But again, they will come and tell you, we really do not have the resources to respond in the way that we are supposed to. You see the difficulties. And then one can even push it further. Imagine the rainy season, there are certain roads you are not going to go there when you're calling in an emergency. You see how all these things are really interlinked, as it were. So now perhaps the thinking is, what is it we can do? Given the circumstances, and then, you know, to begin to grapple with this potentially emerging threat, really, given the demographic, given the population. Let's look at what other countries have experienced and see what we can learn and from them. There's always something to learn from somebody else and see how best we can adapt to this new reality.
Sure, indeed, adapt we must. And any viewers wondering, gosh, they spend a long time on that story. Every story is different, and this is a big story. There's no two ways. You can't compare this to some of the other stories that we got coming. So if you're panicking, don't panic, either at home or anywhere else. Story number 2. We about, as this program is going out, the 2nd edition of Regional Consultative Dialogue is up and running. And what's it all about? This might tell you.
This consultative engagement is a nationwide initiative aimed at fostering unity, peaceful coexistence and national development. Launched last year by the Office of the President, the dialogue is spearheaded by a committee comprising members from diverse backgrounds, including the Inter-Party Committee, civil society, religious and youth groups, amongst others. And with the nation set to commemorate 60 years of self-rule, the regional governor hosts community leaders, politicians, women's groups, security chiefs and activists in the region for a day-long dialogue on pressing national issues to register their concerns and recommendations to foster people-centered policies and programs. Bakari Karasingate, Regional Coordinator for Kanifing Municipality, calls on Gambians to put aside their political difference and always promote peace.
Today is a very, very significant day in our history because it's cementing what we have started since the coming of this government, that is encouraging and actually consolidating dialogue among ourselves.
Consolidating dialogue, Mr. Mboj, and we talk about putting aside political differences. So we're talking about consulting local, but to address national issues. And, you know, it's the 2nd edition. Do we have any sense of how successful or not the 1st edition was?
Some might say that it's too early to tell.
Sure.
Because of really what they set themselves out to achieve. That will take some time.
Quite a task, yeah.
When I listened to that gentleman there, I said, no, we cannot put aside our political differences. Let's be careful here.
Yeah.
Because all political opinions, so people will tell you, they're doing it in the interest of the nation.
This is it. When we interview people, that's exactly what they said. You know, I have the solution for the Gambia. The person in office, be it the president or party, don't have the solution, but my party has the solution. So you're absolutely right. You know, so when they say put aside, it's
you can't.
Yeah.
So the next question will be: is that okay? What kind of politics do we want to do? I think that's really what the key is.
Sure.
And the theme is marching in solidarity for self-reliance and national development. Yeah. So what would solidarity look like? As it were, isn't it? Already our political system, democracy, there is political competition.
Yeah.
The competition is there. We will disagree on things. That is why we have different parties.
Sure.
So what kind of platform do you want that can accommodate, as it were, all shades of you know, political opinion, and yet it feels that it belongs, it owns it, that sort of platform. I think that's really what the difficulty is.
Yes.
What kind of politics do we want to do? What kind of people are we? I have to give this anecdote, Ade, just to demonstrate the point. When I was younger, high school, there was parliamentary elections in Bakau. So there was a PPP candidate called Sam Silla. So we were all PPP. So I had his T-shirt. You know, the man now called Dembo by Force, NCP.
Yes.
You know, had many compounds. So I wore my Sam Silla T-shirt. I went to Dembo by Force, a compound that was dead Dembo by Force. Yeah, I went to visit somebody, not to provoke, and because we were friends. So I went in there. Nobody cursed me. Nobody touched me. Afterwards, when I left, of course, one of the aunts came and said, "Is your friend okay?"
Coming here wearing that T-shirt.
Is that what we want? To rediscover that depth of really, I call it civilization. It's like the social bonds being deeper than the political divisions. can you imagine anybody doing that today?
Yeah, quite.
I cannot really
Well, this
imagine
is it.
these
Because when you
days.
look at the, as you
See?
rightly said at the beginning of this, when you look at the party manifestos, essentially they're all saying the same thing.
Yes.
You know, we have the magic bullet that will solve all the problems of the Gambia
That's it.
and make everybody live a better life.
That's it.
Yeah.
So for me, this solidarity will come from tolerance.
Sure, sure.
How do you tolerate stuff like that?
Yeah.
Not that people wouldn't say hurtful things, especially now in the world of social media.
Yeah, quite.
You are always going to have that. Some people are just thoughtless. Others are just cruel. You know what I mean? And now we have a platform where they can write whatever they want to write, and you can potentially have millions.
Sure, sure.
You know,
So in short, the jury's out
the jury's out.
as to whether it's a success or not. But I think you're
Or
right.
rather, what's the aim? You
Yes,
know,
yes, yes,
setting goals in
Right.
relation to attainable outcomes.
Sure.
Smart goal setting used to be called.
Yeah, quite.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
So it can lead to some things. It depends on what. If you set unattainable goals, this is going to be a talking shop.
Yeah, quite. That's the fear. Thank you for that, Mr. Ambrose. Story number 3. His Excellency the President recently opened the legal year at a very colorful ceremony. Don't believe me? Have a look and see.
We started the 2024 legal year with a total of 6,317 cases as at the 1st of January 2024. And this was a carryover from 2023. In the course of 2024, a total of 6,678 new cases were filed. New cases in addition to the carryover. Of the new cases filed, 4,849 were civil cases, and 1,826 were criminal cases of various kinds.
The Gambia Bar Association, through its members, continues to provide legal representation to those whose rights are infringed, challenge provisions of the law we consider unjust, and suggest necessary reforms. Our members must be able to represent their clients, including those with grievances against the government, without getting labeled as being against the government.
Yes, you can take a case against the government without being labeled as being against the government, rightly said there. I think Nene MC Cham.
And MC Cham there, yes, President of the Gambia Bar Association,
yes.
taking over from Salutala.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And we go back to just short of 13,000 cases in 2.5 years, 12,995. I make it with my poor mathematics. So they're bulging. So this story and our next story kind of touch on some of that, but a number of cases there, and people we hear anecdotally or otherwise talk about the slow pace of cases as they proceed through the court, and this seems to indicate this. And I've mentioned it many times that a friend of mine has been involved in a court case since I landed in the Gambia, and that case is still unresolved, and that's just one. I know it's not every, but we hear the stories a lot. So the legal year, they really have their work cut out.
Yes, and they said the 25% increase from 2023 to 2024, and then you imagine. So this is it. Yeah. Yes, the next story will be more interesting. So the kind of reforms,
yeah, quite,
they want to carry out to tackle this, to speed up cases, to address them. And it is true. I also know somebody who's been involved in some land dispute. I mean, for 3 years. In some degree, that should have been very simple.
Is also a land dispute.
Yeah, it should have been very simple. You know, his land, somebody else built on it.
Yeah,
and it's been difficult to evict them.
Yeah,
it's something, you know, that should be really very quick, as it were. But now, as things are, that's not the case.
Sure.
So they're trying to do something about it.
Sure.
And this is it. That's the purpose of a legal year.
Well, indeed. They kind of
to review, look back, and look forward, and for us to know what you're doing about the issues.
Thank you for that. And our next story shows how they're looking forward. And we haven't just jumbled these together because Gambia is now about to establish its own dedicated commercial court. What's that, I hear you ask? This will tell you.
It's very, very important that a commercial division is established in order to promote and retain investor confidence. Investors look for a number of things when they want to go into any country, even local investors as well. You want to be sure that the laws in that country are fair, they are relevant. You want to make sure that the judicial system works well. You want to be assured that in the case of a dispute, your dispute will be resolved quickly and fairly. And having a commercial division of judges who are specialized in that field helps in all those matters. We expect that once we set up the division, the commercial cases will move much more quickly. Within the next couple of months, the division will be established by order of the Chief Justice, and we already have judges in place who are specialized in commercial law, and they are experienced judges. And once it's established, I will assign them to that division.
As I mentioned, that case, this one that we're studying, follows on for the previous story seamlessly, hopefully, because Mr. Mboji, you rightly said, they're looking at solutions. And one of the solutions has been that many of the cases that are currently in the courts are cases that should be dealt with by a dedicated commercial court. And now we are about to have that. And in case anybody thinks, why do we need one? Well, when you look at the Global Doing Business Index, those countries that don't have a commercial court system are marked very, very low, and investors are warned not to invest in those countries, because if there's a dispute, there isn't an easy way of the matter being resolved. Your money might be tied up for 10 or 20 years. But now, commercial court is here, and it's imminent.
Absolutely, and everybody benefits, really, because it's a faster case resolution, isn't it? And a more efficient enforcement of contracts.
This is true.
That big businesses, small businesses, we all gain. And of course, yes, there's an added bit of investor confidence.
Yes, sure.
Absolutely. So, yes, and one would also hope that with this idea of having dedicated divisions,
this is it,
would apply to other areas, pressing areas, land, one would like to say,
the because I was trying to
stuff like that.
work out whether the country has a kind of bankruptcy or insolvency law, that if a company owes you money, you can petition to have the company wound up, or if an individual owes you money, you can petition to have that person made bankrupt. I couldn't find any before we came on air, but it's probably out there. But these are the sorts of things, particularly commercial disputes, they should not really be clogging up the courts. And as we said there, so it's fine, you've got the judges who are trained in this. Do we have the lawyers who specialize in this? Because for it to happen and run smoothly, this is what needs to happen. I worked for 10 years as somebody attached to the bankruptcy, the insolvency courts in England, so I know how smoothly the system can run when it's properly done, when the system is there by the people who judge it, as well as the ones who effectively prosecute the cases.
Absolutely, and given that this is really the first time that we're doing this, we would expect that in the beginning you'll have certain niggling setbacks and that sort of thing, but gradually it will grow and mature. The important thing is that for it to begin, isn't it? We're always complaining about having plans and not beginning the action to it, the action. So let it begin, however modestly, and gradually it will grow, and the expertise. And as our Chief Justice said there, they had identified the judges and the people who were running it. And so it seems like they're on track. We will have niggling stuff in the beginning.
I think that's inevitable.
That is inevitable. Sure. But yeah, absolutely, this is it. This is the way to go, to deal with the backlog, really.
And as you said, everybody benefits, both internal investors, businesses, and particularly external investors that we're trying to attract into the country.
Absolutely, and I've long advocated, having what they used to call small claims court.
Yeah. You
know what I mean? Yeah. Because of most of our business, informal, some 80% perhaps, so they will have some way to go. Small claims courts.
That's right.
Fantastic idea.
Brilliant idea. Thank you. I think we both like this one, but thank you for that. And now on to story number 5, which will also take us to the midway point in terms of stories. We here at QTV, I mentioned at the top of the program, we've decided that the month of February 2025 will be Diamond Jubilee month. So not just on the 18th of February, but throughout the month. And so we're celebrating the country, but we're also celebrating individuals, Gambians who've made a significant contribution, who we feel should be celebrated. Such as who? I hear you ask. Have a look at this, and I'll tell you all about that.
My teaching was not confined in the classroom. I believe as teachers, when we have spare time, we should teach the community. I taught the university group. They asked me to talk to them and to demonstrate preservation.
Adelfa Njai was also a passionate women's rights advocate, dedicated to empowering women through economic activities that promote financial independence. She achieved this by providing valuable skills training in areas such as food preservation, balanced diet techniques, and income generation strategies.
Mr. Mboj, one of those cases where you work as a broadcaster and you do a story and you don't know how it's going to be received, but we heard from the lady herself, Adelfa Njai, that the next day she could barely walk in the streets for the number of people coming up to shake her hand, congratulate her, and she said several people hugged her and told her that they didn't even know her story. And this is a person who's written 10 books, and she's gone beyond the classroom. Absolutely inspirational individual.
Absolutely. I'm the daughter of Reverend J.C. Fife.
No less.
No less. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The person who founded the first political party in this country.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Njai from marrying the late Supreme Court Judge Solomon Njai.
Okay.
Absolutely. Extraordinary. When I was listening to that story, you got a sense of what I call the sort of old world virtues.
Indeed.
You see, where educated people, there was a social dimension to your individual achievement.
Yes.
It was quite extraordinary. That had gone beyond just simply having the car and the big house for people to see. There's that dimension, but there was something deeper.
Yes, and that the teaching stayed just in the classroom.
Absolutely.
It went beyond that.
It went beyond that.
Yes.
Because in a way, just as educated people felt that we could speak on behalf of those who are not educated, so we also thought that we had a certain responsibility
quite.
to those who are not educated. So I'm not sure whether that spirit as we're still alive today.
I held myself back from saying that because I didn't want to be attacked by bunches of teachers when I walked out. But certainly growing up, and I've used this, and people think, oh, you're romanticizing. But I genuinely believed that there were teachers who, for them, teaching was a vocation, and it didn't just end in the classroom. And I've mentioned 100 times my favorite teacher, Mrs. Streeter, at Cathedral Boys School in Freetown. And she was somebody who took an interest in us, not just myself, but in the whole class, even after lessons had ended. And even if it wasn't her particular subject, she wanted to know how we were getting on. And, you know, there might be some who still have that, but I don't get the sense. But as I said, you know, I'm a bit wary of saying this because they think, oh, you know, you're kind of romanticizing and being nostalgic about your youth. Yeah.
Well, being nostalgic, maybe that's not a bad thing. But I disagree that you're romanticizing.
Yeah, it was factual.
We were just lucky.
Yeah,
this was in the 1960s. That's when we had independence.
That's right.
What was going on then? The best in the class, because the options open to brilliant students afterwards in terms of career, well, not very high. If you're not, you know, not much. If you're not well connected. So virtually everybody became a teacher. All the smart ones all became teachers in many ways, didn't they? Right. So we were very lucky in that, I feel, because afterwards ambitions changed a lot. Then they became lawyers, doctors, and that sort of thing. But the country didn't respond quickly enough, wasn't it? In Britain, what happened? You came with certain packages, special packages for teachers, so that you would attract top brains. Otherwise, the brightest, you will attract the brightest and the best, but otherwise they'll go to other professions. So really, teaching became just a job.
Yeah, quite.
Whereas it was a vocation, and suddenly it just became a job.
Yeah,
and to be quite honest, a good number of them, they all have private students where they could get more money.
Yeah.
So it was more commercial than having that social aspect, or more aspirational, more idealized, I don't know, in that way.
Yeah, so please, I urge viewers, if you haven't already, go out and check out some of the books that Adel Faye Njie has written, and I think you will definitely benefit from them. That takes us to midway point, and at this point we'll go for a commercial break, and after the break we will have 5 more stories equally as good. So don't go away and join us after this break.
The future is now with QCell's 5G network. Experience speeds like never before with our new 5G Rocket Fixed Internet plan. Get speeds from 10 Mbps to 100 Mbps. Your 5G-enabled devices. Walk into QCell headquarters to get one of our 5G routers and experience the true feeling of 5G. Only with QCell. QCell brings you the future. Tech, innovation, incredible speed. The future is now. For more information, call our customer care on 111. QCell, Sunyabus. We innovate, others follow. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello and welcome back if you were with us in the first half, and if you were not, welcome. And if you are just joining us, apologies that our sign language interpreter, Lamindi Sonko, is not with us this week. We haven't gotten rid of him, it's just that he was not able to get here in time. And so you've missed 5 stories, but as usual, there are 5 cracking stories still to go. Don't believe me? Check out this one. Gambia's National Action Plan on Youth, Peace and Security was recently launched, 2025 to 2030. You didn't know there was such a thing? Well, now you do. What's it all about? Let these people tell you.
Young people are viewed either as vulnerable victims or as perpetrators of conflict. In truth, they are active partners in peace building, essential catalysts for social cohesion, and champions of innovation. I firmly believe that our country's hope for enduring peace, prosperity, and progress depend on the empowering of our youth's energy, talent, and resilience.
The National Action Plan on Youth, Peace and Security is a strategic framework aimed at promoting youth engagement in peace building, violence prevention, and decision making. It tackles challenges like limited job opportunities, social exclusion, and knowledge gaps that hinder youth participation in peace building. Speakers like Ndeye Fatou Nying, Priscilla Dunn, and Ndella Faye Koli emphasized the need for collective action to achieve sustainable development.
Empowering the youth and all that sort of thing. But you always think, you ask the how. How do we do it beyond the talk? And now we have this grandly titled National Action Plan on Youth, Peace and Security, 2025 to 2030. They've launched it, they're taking it nationwide, and they're trying to embrace, because we keep talking about the youth bulge and how disaffected youth can be a problem and so on. And we need to somehow address this, otherwise potential for trouble.
That's it. And when you've got the dates, 2025, 2030, so immediately my thinking there is, what specifically would you achieve in that? What have you set yourselves to achieve within 5 years regarding this youth action plan on youth, peace and security? You know what I mean? How do you measure that? What do you actually write down that is specific, not some generalities?
This is kind of what I'm saying. What is the how?
That's it, the specificities. I don't know, maybe I'm old-fashioned. I think the best thing we can do for youth, have very good education system. Health, isn't it? Skills. Tertiary level, those who want to go in that direction, giving them the appropriate skills, and create a kind of economy that can absorb them in the economy, employment, that can give them employment. I really think that these are where we should focus our energies really, to really empower youth. Because socially, you are going to have that interaction between youth and experience, in the world of work.
As long as the world
that's it.
Of course.
Yes. So I do not know how we're going about this unless, of course, we want to be caught up in this tokenism, whatever organization we form. Okay, let's have one youth. That sort of thing, the superficial stuff. We don't want to, just be on the superficial level. How deeply do you integrate them? I don't know. It depends on one's competence, experience, and all sorts of things before I give you any job. So I just want to stick to the education, good health, opportunities, and then they will develop to be good adults.
Brilliant. Brilliant full stop on that. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And now on to story number 7. PURA, the regulatory authority, recently held a cybersecurity training forum. Why does cybersecurity matter, you may be asking? This clip might tell you.
If we adopt them differently, different standards, we are only creating market for those people who like to attack and put you down. And they are there, we can see them. Some are state operators. Some are just very intelligent, people who just want to prove a point. But some are just incorporated entities in the business of getting more money.
Meanwhile, he called for a review of national instruments and policies and more enforcement of cyber laws to protect public institutions, mostly central government agencies, who are mostly targeted by cyber criminals.
Mostly central government agencies tackle, but Mr. Mboj, not just central government agencies. And we were talking about, taking precautions, CCTV, in another story on this very program just a few minutes back. And cybersecurity is something that, because virtually every business that can call itself a business does some element of business online. And if you don't have robust systems to protect, then you can easily be hacked, as we've seen and heard. And this training, a few days training is not going to solve it, but we need to address this. We can't just say, the rest of the world is behaving, because we are part of the rest of the world. We're interacting with the rest of the world.
The brave new world, isn't it?
Yeah, quite.
Oh, absolutely. If nothing else, it shows you that they recognize the threat.
Indeed.
As it were, and they're trying to do something about it, at the very least. So we'll see where it goes. This is very serious. In one of our stories, our African News Roundup, we covered a story in Nigeria where they apprehended more than 100 people, a good number of them Chinese, teaching Nigerians how to scam people, how to commit these cyber crimes. So this is here to stay. So how do you prepare yourself? How do you construct your defenses, as it were? You need the infrastructure, you need the expertise. This is what worries me, really, because often, anywhere you touch, we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have this, we don't have that. Well, if you don't, then you're not protecting yourself. Quite. There isn't much that you can do.
Because, down the line, if, as you said in another story about learning from others, in Britain, certainly, they set up something called the Office of the E-Envoy when the internet was in its infancy. And that kind of led on to other things, because one of the first things they noticed was that certain laws had to change, because the laws that existed did not take cognizance of online crimes. You can't convict somebody on something unless it's a crime. And if you haven't enacted laws, so this cannot sit on its own, there are other things that need to go with it. And even in a kind of, not even in a criminal sense, there was a famous case which at the time made the news globally, because, very quick anecdote, a gentleman was sacked via email. And he said, you can't sack me by email. The law doesn't allow you for that, because the law said you had to post a letter, it had to be a registered letter, and all of that nonsense. But he lost the case because the employer was able to prove that he accepted his employment by email. So your dismissal. So I mention this just in the sense that, case law eventually led to a change, in that particular case led to a change in the law that this is something we need to enact, because that was a one-off case. But generally, there are other things that need to happen in terms of cybersecurity, and not just people attending kind of workshop.
Absolutely, certainly must have the legislative framework,
Indeed.
as it were, to tackle it, isn't it? But again, people who are in the law authorities, law and enforcement authorities who are in the business of trying to prevent crime. Now you've got this aspect, cybercrime.
Yeah, right.
So you're going to have perhaps a cybercrime division,
as
a unit,
Yeah,
stuff like that, whatever you call it, and that's with the right expertise.
Indeed.
How do you investigate these things,
Quite.
in a way that you would gather the right evidence so that it will stack up in court?
Exactly.
Because you always have one eye on what's
Quite.
going to happen in the courts. If you do not do it properly, then you will lose in court. So this will be some of the challenges that we face.
Sure.
But certainly, exactly, the whole world, everybody's worried about it.
Exactly.
Even the so-called developed countries,
Well,
they're
indeed.
struggling to keep up. It's an arms race, isn't it?
Very much.
Government, the defenses will come with something, but the attackers would also adapt and come with something else.
And some of the crimes, they're not even commercial.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a BBC article which people can read about people who'd had their identities hijacked and what they call deep fake, your image or your face superimposed on a naked body and so on and then shared, and people think it's you. So things like that. And the person who in New Zealand, the case that the BBC mentioned, New Zealand or Australia, the person who was convicted got a 9-year sentence, and they said, we want to send a signal and a message, but the laws exist to deal with that, and before they didn't. So,
absolutely,
yeah.
and we must all sort of learn digital literacy,
Yeah.
which would incorporate stuff like that.
Quite.
How we could be a bit savvy in how we interact
This is it.
with technology.
And if anybody's watching this and thinking, why do I need to? Well, just think about how many of us now just send money digitally. Almost all of us.
Absolutely.
And so we're already getting into that space. So we need to be secure in that space.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
So
yeah. Well, thank you for that. So yes, cybersecurity training. I think all of us need it. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Story number 8. The International Fund for Agricultural Development recently held a 2-day event in Rome, in Italy, and I watched it all 10 hours of it. Not because I enjoy being punished, but because IFAD, International Fund for Agricultural Development, does have some projects here in the Gambia, and I was pleased to see that there were Gambian delegates amongst them, but also there were some heads of state. Have a look, have a listen.
The overarching purpose of these investments should be to break the intergenerational cycle of poverty and malnutrition, and to find long-lasting solutions that will help us create sustainable food systems that can deliver healthy diets.
With the right support, rural populations have the potential to sustain themselves and their economies and communities.
The First Lady of Brazil, Janja Lula da Silva, spoke on the global hunger crisis, questioning how 800 million people can still suffer from hunger in a world that produces enough food for all.
And First Lady Lula da Silva asked that very, Janja Lula da Silva asked that very pointed question, and she said we should be ashamed. And as I said, I saw there were Gambian delegates in the audience because IFAD, International Fund for Agricultural Development, does have several projects across the Gambia, mainly about empowering women to grow food, but also about preservation and so on. So very important, and they talked about the last mile, but they said they should be the first mile. IFAD, small-scale farmers can grow food that nourishes the whole world. But yes, how can we grow more food than we need, and yet people are hungry, people are starving?
And now we are talking about a kind of industrialization of farming.
Quite.
See, the big projects.
Quite.
Even though we've had studies, I've read a few where they've shown that really, if you want to make an impact on ordinary people, supporting small-scale industries
is the thing.
that really has more impact than bringing in the big industries.
Yeah, because a lot of the big
they
industries
serve
for
really
people who
very
want to
limited
export. Yeah,
as a small
right.
interest.
Right.
But the one that would have an impact on the masses, as it were, it's really the small scale
Well,
in
that's
many
right.
ways. They've had a few studies on that.
Right.
So we've just not been doing it. But, you know, the evidence been out there
for a while. I was tempted to say, eat what you grow and grow what you eat. But I think somebody's used that already here in the Gambia. But essentially, that's what we're talking about. Empower people to be able to, on a smaller scale rather than the big scale. Because as you rightly say, studies also show that when you do the big scale thing, a machine that can do the work of 100 people, well, what about the 100 people who are doing that job? What do you do with them? So it's not always the best, but these are some of the things that they looked at, that they tackled. As I say, I watched it right to the end, and as usual, there was a communique and so on. But you do wonder how effective these were going to be. And when I thought of that, I thought, okay, well, let me look at some of the projects that they've done here in the Gambia. And actually, some of them have been quite effective. And so people can go on YouTube and they can find, just put IFAD, IFAD, the Gambia, and all the stories of the work that they've done in the Gambia. All of them will come up. And there's some very, very interesting stories.
That's it. But what comes through, in this report, the really massive scandal, is really this misalignment between availability, as it were, it's there, and having some people suffering between need and supply.
Yeah, well,
as it were. That is really where the scandal is.
Sure.
So how do you address this inequity,
essentially,
isn't it? That's really what we need to address. So yes, fine words indeed.
Yeah, sure.
And we've been heard from the President of Sierra Leone,
Julius Maada Bio.
there.
Yeah, sure.
Fine words indeed.
Sure.
But how do you make it happen? That's really
my thoughts, exactly.
You know what you mean.
That's the nut we haven't cracked yet, Mr. Ambush, but thank you for that. Story number 9, as my colleague in the office said, second to last story. I'll stop saying penultimate. We looked at, as I said, we celebrate people who we feel should be celebrated here in the Gambia, because we're using this 60th anniversary of independence to as kind of reflection on where we've been and where we should be going. And one of the people who we wanted to honor is Lucien Tomasi, designer of the Gambian flag. Have a look at this.
The whole of Makati Square was in darkness. And then during that period, the Union Jack, the British Union Jack, was lowered. And the flag was hoisted up very gradually. And suddenly there was this light. When the flag reached its zenith, the lights came on, and that's it. That's the independence. And there was a lot of clapping, singing, dancing.
Through his design, one of the 8 which he submitted, all featuring the same colors, Louis Tomasi gifted the Gambia a flag that will carry the hopes, struggles and aspirations of generations to come. Despite his pivotal role in designing the national flag,
Mr. Mboj, both inside and outside the office, we've been getting people congratulating us on these stories, which is good. Our colleague Lansana Tunkara said, he loved the fact that we were celebrating these people who had gone uncelebrated, but who deserved to be celebrated. And Tomasi's one, not only is he uncelebrated, for all these years, but even at the time he was relatively uncelebrated, despite the fact that he had designed our flag.
Absolutely, and I didn't know that. So when I watched the news last night, so that was when I got to know about all that. Those aspects, really unfortunate aspects about not being celebrated. But again, history of mankind is sort of replete with such examples.
It happened in Ghana. The woman who designed their flag, it's only about 20 years ago that somebody said, do you know that she's still alive? And they're like, what? And a similar thing, a competition was run, she won it and so on. And for her, the benefits ended up being quite substantial. She was given new housing, given a pension and so on, and in appreciation of the fact that this flag that Ghanaians brandish with such pride was designed by this person. And she explained how she got, she died in 2015, I think, I think 2015. But she lived to a ripe old age, I think 82 or 92, yeah.
Absolutely, and in our story, and listening to Marcel Tomasi there, it was interesting that Gambia was switched on with a new flag.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
That's right. And in case anybody, we didn't introduce Marcel Tomasi. He's the son of Louis Lucien Tomasi, who designed the flag. Born in Mali, he was not. Another irony there that somebody who wasn't even born in the Gambia is the one who designed our flag. But when you look at the reasons why he chose the colors, again, you know, he gave the reasons, and he submitted 8 designs, of which one was chosen, and he won the princely sum of £50 for it.
Absolutely. I mean, unbelievable. Most of us really went through school, you know, waving the flags and all of that, really, but had no understanding. Didn't know the history of the flag at all.
Quite.
Just very important for us to
I think
know.
they teach what the colors mean, but not the history of the flag.
Not the history of the flag.
Sure,
That's it. And even with the colors, well, from our story, it was made to be a kind of more symbolic. But apparently, when you look at our geography, you will have the bit that's red, the laterite area.
That's right. Yes,
even when you look at the strips, the white strips, there's something out there in our geography that seems to be split in this way, and you have the green lush area.
Of course, yes,
so that is a physical, as it were,
manifestation of it.
Yeah, so absolutely, it's good to know.
It's good to know these things. So keep watching. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And that takes us to our final story. And the producers in the control room can stop panicking. They think, oh my God, these guys are going to run out of time. Kau Lower Basic School, they celebrated their belated platinum jubilee, and much merriment was had. It was slightly late, and this might tell you why. Have a look, have a listen.
We are here to celebrate the longevity and the achievements of the school. The school has done great things. So many people have passed here, and then some of them now are working in different parts of the Gambia. Some are in Europe, some are in America. So that is one achievement. So the school has done very well, and then the people of Kaur are supposed to help the school to grow.
Mohamed S.M. Job, the steering committee chairman, and Mohamed Jeng, a retired head teacher and former student of the school, called for united efforts to develop the school. They outlined various projects and measures for implementation.
We want to uplift the entire structure of the school, first by ensuring that we rehabilitate, renovate, or build staff quarters, repaint all the classrooms, and provide furniture. Then we intend to embark on a serious discussion with the committee in Kauru to ensure they maintain the status quo.
So Mboj, we talk about the being 8 years late in terms of celebrating. The school was opened in 1946, but nonetheless they got there. And earlier we were talking about schools and so on. But one of the things that's important about a school is the conducive atmosphere. You can have good teachers, but the atmosphere, the surroundings also have to be conducive actually to make it a pleasurable learning experience.
Absolutely, and how well do they connect with the community?
Yeah, indeed.
That's really the base. So
because this one grew from a much smaller school into a bigger one because of demand from the community that we need something bigger. So 1 year after it was opened, they realized that they needed to move somewhere bigger, which is now where they are now. In 1947, they moved to where they are now.
That's it. Surviving for that long. Can you remember? We go back to 1946. You know, outside of the colony.
Yeah, well, this is
so how many schools were out there? Well, we know that the school, the Anglican Mission School at Christukunda, they call Christukunda, was opened in 1940.
Right.
So I mean,
so this was 6 years later.
6 years later, and in fact, something else had happened because by 1945, the mission stopped running the schools. So it was everything was transferred to what we had as education, director of education. We had that sort of thing. I'm not surprised by 1946 they tried perhaps to build schools, and that was maybe one of them, as it were. And yes, and it has survived this long. Of course, over the years, quality of teachers, having the right equipment, teaching equipment, creating the right environment, really, to teach well. A lot of things have come short, but we must congratulate them for their longevity.
Well, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Really, and see how things can be improved.
See how things can be improved, and we wish them many years, and even maybe a double platinum at some point, and by which time, of course, we hope that the refurbishments that they're yearning for have happened. Thank you, Mr. Mboj, for your interjections throughout, and of course to you, The viewers, thank you for watching, and until we come your way again next week, goodbye.